So welcome everyone. My name is Rafał Obrębski. I am a gameplay designer at CD PROJEKT RED for Project Phantom Liberty and the update 2.0. I was also leading the role of design coordinator. And welcome to the talk about marrying gameplay with narration for Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. That also includes the big update 2.0. So let's start with taking a sneak peek into what I'll be covering today. All right, so I would start the whole discussion with quite an important for me disclaimer. Usually on talks like this, you see one person on the stage, but it's always a team effort. Today's talk will be led from the direction of gameplay design, and that means that any given topic that I'll cover today was touched most likely by any given name from this list, and most likely by more people from the full credits, but that would take quite a long time to put them all here. Let me take you back in time at the beginning of the presentation to the challenging times of 2020. I think most of you have some memories from those times. That's when the pandemic was at the strongest. And for us, it was our release of base game of Cyberpunk 2077, and a time of quite challenging and needed changes, a little bit of chaos, I would even say. I actually remember because we moved to that's when we moved to the home office model. That was something completely new for us, and actually our release party happened online, so that was quite an experience, drinking some beverages with your web camera instead of people in the room. But as usually when project is being released, there are some changes in terms of the team structure. When the project finishes, people change projects, some people change companies, and that happened to us as well. In our gameplay team, we had quite a few changes in terms of our structure, our leadership. And that was the time when we actually started thinking, okay, what do we want to do next? How do we want to approach the new expansion that we want to make? We started asking ourselves, maybe we'll just go easy way about it, right? We'll change some stuff. Our systems are, from gameplay perspective, in quite a good shape at that time. Maybe we didn't love some stuff, but it wasn't like everything was needed to be completely changed. And that was quite tempting at that moment. Maybe we'll just, settle down, tweak some of the stuff, and call it a day. And also, that was the time when we started asking ourselves, how much can we actually change? Because the timeline that we knew we have was around 1.5 to 2 years. And in game dev years, it's not a big amount of time to change anything. But then the biggest question that kept reappearing, especially for our leaders, what do we as game designers even want from the game? Where do we see it in 2 years' time? Do we like how it is currently? Maybe there are some stuff that we would like to change. And the one topic that kept reappearing as well is, okay, what if we fail? 2 years isn't a huge amount of time to introduce big changes. And what if we bite too much and we cannot chew it? What then? Can we even afford it? And that's gonna sound very cheesy, and I know it sounds like a corporate language, but I actually mean it here. That was the time when we actually started looking towards our company values. This is something that started reappearing as sort of a guideline where the company wants us to go, be ambitious, set the goal and persevere, and always remember about gamers. And for us, that was kind of a hint that, well, it is worth taking this bigger risk. The company will kind of support us in it. So we did. We started thinking about bigger changes, and that led to a huge commitment. First and foremost, we decided to leave no stone unturned in terms of gameplay. Unturned and not replaced. We decided to keep the gist of our systems the same, but kind of revisit every single piece of the system and tweak it to our values, or rather change it to the way we actually want it to be. Another is we will put a huge focus on player choices in gameplay. And that was something that we already had in the game, but we knew that there were some of the examples in which player choice isn't really resonating as much as it does in the narrative layer. So that was something that we really wanted to change. And then the last kind of commitment that was very important for me is we decided to bring narration and gameplay closer together. But what does it even mean, marrying gameplay with narration? Because it sounds a little bit vague, so let me kind of cover what it concludes of. First and foremost, we started talking more and more about our narrative gameplay language. And maybe not establishing it because our game already had one, but rather redesigning it and rethinking how we want our gameplay to speak and how we want our gameplay, what stories do we want our gameplay to speak through. Because every medium has its own narrative language. Books have their own, films have their own, games have their own, but we started thinking about it more granularly and thinking how our gameplay can tell a story more. Then we put a huge focus on the fantasy of living inside of Night City. That was the moment of huge realization for us that Cyberpunk and Night City is a very unique place and very, something that doesn't really have many comparisons in other worlds. And we started thinking, how can we make sure that we put player directly in it? What are the elements that will actually fill Cyberpunk more in gameplay perspective? And then, as I mentioned, we decided that marrying gameplay with narration means that we have to put bigger emphasis on player choices. And why is it important? Well, the more choices you make in the gameplay, in moment-to-moment gameplay, the more connected to your V you are, and the more immersed in the game you are. The more choices you make, you build bigger identity as a player, and that was hugely important for the narration of our gameplay. And then, in some of the cases, we decided that we will be taking compromises with narration layer, meaning, we knew that we are CD PROJEKT RED. For us, story is the king, and we needed to acknowledge it a little bit more. And as a guiding rule, we decided whenever the narrative layer will be enhanced by our decision, we'll always take that decision, just to enhance this narration a little bit further. So let's jump to actual examples of what we changed for gameplay being closer to narration. And the first example came for us quite unexpectedly. One side note here you have to keep in mind is that our gameplay team actually started working on the expansion around half a year or 8 months later than some of the other teams. And when we jumped into the expansion production, some of the things were already settled and decided upon. And one of such things was the new area of the game where the expansion will take place, Docktown. But why is it even important in terms of gameplay narrative language? Well, we came to realization whenever we started playtesting our gameplay systems inside of this new area. We started seeing that, the new area has completely new idea in terms of how the player should feel inside of it. And let me compare it to how usually Night City looks like. Obviously, it's very much different from district to district, but usually when you walk around Night City, You have quite a vast open area with not a lot of static encounters placed there, meaning that if I start fighting some gangers in Central Night City, I will rather fight with them directly. But when I move to Docktown, well, the place is way more crowded in terms of Barghest officers, which is the new police squad in Docktown, in terms of just static encounters that are placed there. Even the level layout is a little bit more cramped and a little bit more crowded. And why does it matter? Well, our AI systems work in a way that basically we took a huge importance in how our stimuli aggroes enemies. So if I shot a bullet into the air, let's say, and some ganger or some Barghest officer heard this bullet, he would be aggroed to me and he would start shooting at me. And when we have an area in which there is a lot of static encounters placed around, well, when I'm gonna start fighting one of them, many different encounter groups will hear it and will aggro on me. And that leads to situations that if I start an encounter with one group, well, after some time I have the whole of Docktown on me, and I have to fight them, and I cannot even leave the area, because one thing about Docktown was that it is gated from the rest of Night City. It was done in a way that if you want to leave Docktown, you have to go through a checkpoint, and they will not let you out if you have Barghest on you, because you're a criminal. In their eyes, they want to kill you, and you wouldn't be able to leave. So not only you had a lot of enemies on you, you couldn't even leave the encounter. And we had two ways to go about it. Either we change the encounter setup in Docktown entirely and make sure that our systems are done in a way that whenever I fight one group, I only fight this group. Or we go the hard way about it and we change the base layer of how our AI works, how our stimuli system works. And that was very dangerous for us, because that's something that, well, as you may imagine, it's something that is grounded at the very base level of our AI. And we only had 2 years, so there were a lot of issues that could happen to us without even, we wouldn't have even time to check it fully. But we decided to take this risk because the alternative was changing how Docktown feels for the player. It would no longer be this very dangerous area with a lot of static encounters. And Docktown area also introduced a little bit more verticality to our level, to the level design setting of the game. And that also meant for us a few changes in terms of how player can move and how player can get around the area. Another thing when talking about marrying gameplay with narration is the fact that Phantom Liberty is an espionage fantasy. It's a spy thriller in terms of like game, how the game feels. And for us, it meant quite a few things in how we can enhance this fantasy of espionage for the player. First and foremost, our stealth systems. We had a lot done in the game before, but we realized that when players will jump into Phantom Liberty, they will want to play this fantasy of spy thriller. So we revisited, again, very base systems in our game, and we completely changed how our AI moves around in stealth, how they navigate. We added a lot of things to how they react to bullet trajectory. So we shoot around some static encounter in stealth, and maybe they didn't hear it, but they saw a bullet on the ground, and hey guys, someone's shooting at us. Maybe we should react. How they started searching player in their routines. All of that we changed to enhance this challenge of player being in stealth. Another thing that we did to engage player in this stealth loop more is adding a lot of new arsenal to their inventory. That also meant that we started treating stealth playstyle as something that you can basically do kind of regardless of your base build. And there's a lot of new combinations of weapons that will work with any given build that you can actually engage in stealth, as different kind of build on you. And another part that we touched a lot on is the fantasy of Netrunner in stealth. This was something that also felt very unique for our game, for Cyberpunk and for Night City, the fantasy of living in Cyberpunk world. And we reworked a lot on how we introduce challenge to player that is a Netrunner playstyle and is trying to hack enemy in stealth. We added this system trace structure in which when you started playing as a Netrunner in stealth and you started hacking enemies from the cover, there was actually we added this fantasy that there is some Netrunner trying to find you. Maybe it's a human Netrunner, or maybe it's like an AI system that tries to find you. And this introduced this role playing to the whole aspect of Netrunner in stealth. That well, I am hidden. I am a Netrunner, but they do acknowledge that I'm there. There is someone that actually is trying to find me. And it wasn't a very straightforward system. It didn't tell you exactly what's going on, but that was left for the player to kind of realize. Another hugely important aspect of marrying gameplay with narration is how we started treating builds and player identity in our game. First and foremost, we decided from the very beginning that we want our builds and our the choice of perks to build a strong identity for the player. And that had to mean something for the players, mean something more. And first thing that we introduced was actually the fact that you no longer can respec your attributes at any moment. You can do it once, because if you jumped on the expansion after establishing your build, you had to have a chance to respec stuff. But we wanted players to actually feel this importance, that I no longer play as a Netrunner, I no longer play as a solo gunslinger, I am Netrunner, I am gunslinger. This was something that meant a lot to us. And another fact that we completely changed in terms of our perk systems is that, well, we revisited every single perk tree, and we changed how we approach passive perks, meaning that basically beforehand you had a chance to unlock a certain perk that gives you X% of boost to any given stat. But we started gating it instead of just giving you this passive boost. We actually added verbs and actual activities that you have to do in moment-to-moment gameplay to unlock this percentage boost, or giving you completely new moveset possibilities. And by the way, this system, if you're interested in deep dive, there's an interesting talk tomorrow by Julia Primak. I really encourage you to check it out if you're interested in perks. Another part that we touched in terms of perk tree that brought it closer with narrative layer is the new perk tree, the relic perk tree, because that was an actual point of contact with our narrative layer. Not only this perk tree is given to you by one of the important characters in the game at the beginning of expansion, Songbird, it is also you have to level it up through progressing the story and through exploring the Docktown area. So this perk was hugely connected to the narrative part of the game, because you could no longer just level it up through XP. You had to actually progress through the story to unlock certain stuff in it. Let's move on. Another part that hugely influenced how we started marrying gameplay with narration is our focus on player choices in gameplay. And it sounds vague, but let me give you some examples what I mean here. It is very much visible in how we approached the healing system, for example. In the old version, you could have, as visible here, like 532 healing items in your backpack, which technically meant that you can use them endlessly. And you have every mean in the game that to collect them and to stack more of them, and only then go into encounters with 3 tons of inhalers in your backpack. And that we realized that when you have almost an infinite number of healing items on you, healing no longer becomes a choice. It's something obvious for you. You got shot once, -1 HP. it's a healing button for me immediately. I don't have to even think about it because I have endless resources of them, so why not? We moved it to having healing charges instead. So to introduce this actual tactic. Okay, I'm currently on cooldown with my healing item, so I should probably hide and maybe then wait a bit because I see another police vehicle coming to me, so I'll shoot them a bit and only then heal because that will give me a little bit more room to it. And also, we introduced, with every system like that, we introduced a lot of synergies with perks and cyberware, like for example, the biomonitor, that completely redefines how you use those items in the first place. What is your character? How is your V healing? It seems vague, again, like it seems like a small thing, but it's hugely important whenever you have a lot of those systems that you actually take decision on, an active decision on. It just brings you closer to your V and closer to your identity. Another example of such system is how we approach our weapon loot. Instead of giving player, with a new dropped weapon, a huge green arrow like, hey, this weapon has bigger damage, maybe you should, switch to it. Again, this seemed for us like an obvious choice for the player. Okay, I see a green arrow, I'm switching immediately. And for us, it meant, well, who made this decision? The developer made this decision by showing this green arrow. Instead of giving player actual time to understand how the weapon handles in their hands. That's why I introduced the weapon tier system that allows you to stay longer with your weapon, to actually see how this weapon handles in many, many different ways than just damage green arrow bigger, I'm choosing this one. Another hugely important part in terms of marrying gameplay with narration is all the things that should fit Cyberpunk world better. And the first example here is how we started seeing the Cyberware system in our game. Again, this is something completely unique for Cyberpunk world, the Chrome that people install on their bodies. And we started seeing some stuff that we can improve there. For example, we realized that from a fantasy point of view, when you walk around Night City, you wouldn't really expect people to wear heavy Kevlar vests, wearing an armor or shields, because in this fantasy and at this league, this stuff comes from the Chrome that people install right into their bodies. So that's what we did. We moved the armor stat right to the cyberware, because this is what our fantasy of cyberpunk is. Obviously, you can have a Kevlar vest that will give you a little bit of the boost to your armor stat, but the main part comes from cyberware. That also unlocked us within thinking about the fashion in the game as well. When we started working on Phantom Liberty, we already had a transmog system, which was, I think, added in 1.5, that also allows you to maybe change your appearance to your liking, but we actually started thinking how we can allow players to make bigger choices in terms of their fashion. They no longer have to think about stats when picking items, but also we thought, well, it's kind of weird that when I kill a dude on the street, I can loot his jacket or a dress and start wearing it. It started feeling like something is disconnected there. Okay, I'm wearing a dress from a lady I just killed, or it sounds wrong. And same goes with the cyberware, the Chrome. You technically shouldn't be able to cut out a piece of cyberware from someone's skull and start wearing it. It just seemed wrong from the fantasy point of view. So we removed this, and we moved it to, okay, if you want to have a choice in your fashion, you can do it with just your money and buying the pieces that you actually like. Another part that we started thinking heavily about is how uniquely cyberware plays with the fantasy of being human or being less human. We introduced this new system of cyberware capacity, and that the aim of it was, well, basically we want to force player, whenever they are installing a new piece of cyberware, or maybe when they are inspecting their character, to think, okay, like there is this level that my body can take. This is something that provokes your thought. Okay, how much human is in me? And this was something very important in terms of this gameplay narrative, that you are installing a new piece, but you are becoming maybe a little bit less human. And then alongside with those things that should play along with the cyberpunk fantasy, we started also thinking, what are the things that we can do to make sure that player is living inside of this world and isn't distracted by some of the stuff that takes them away from the cyberpunk fantasy. And first thing that we did, and it was hugely something that we were really excited to work on, is the car combat. This is something that we started seeing, like our vision of Night City from the base game. Well, we have a very awesome vehicle driving system. We know that people enjoy it, and we enjoy it. Let's add something more to it. Let's add a completely new layer of interacting with a system that is already known. And this played hugely within our fantasy of what would happen in Night City. You have huge roads, and there's a lot of people using their vehicles, and the car chases is something that was missing. And when we added it, it started feeling like more cyberpunk thing for us. And then there is police system. And police system is something quite difficult to even discuss, or rather quite challenging to discuss. Because, well, if you have a AAA game with open world in which you can actually do stuff to civilians, you can do, cause a mayhem inside of a city center, police system is something you kind of have to do in terms of the game's rating and the importance of the law. You have to implement something like that. And on top of that, you cannot really reward player for killing police officers due to ratings as well, and it's just something that would be weird. And we started thinking, okay, we have this police system in the base game already, and how we can make sure that it's something cyberpunk, something completely unique for the player. And first thing that popped in mind is, well, the idea of how police officers are living in this world as well. And we took some inspirations from Pac-Man, for example, in which whenever you have a police chase, every police vehicle has its own agenda, has its own goal towards you, and when you play around with the system, you start noticing that, hey, this police vehicle did something completely different than this one, and this one seems a little bit more mad at me. Maybe I should add it more. And on top of that, we started realizing that there are some elements to the system in which, for example, for the balance of the police system, we need to sometimes de-escalate the chase. Maybe we need to remove one police vehicle from the pool. And instead of just stopping it and making it go somewhere, we wanted always to maybe make it more cinematic. And in such situations, we make it literally drive into a wall to create an explosion for you to have something more cinematic to it. And when talking about police, a hugely important part for police system that is uniquely cyberpunk is the max stack. As I said, we cannot really reward player due to ratings, for example, for killing police officers. But what we can do is kind of reward them with some narrative fantasy piece. And if you are very much into the cyberpunk world, you start realizing that if someone did what you did when you are at 4th star of police system, in this world, such a person would be called cyber psycho. And this was something that started resonating with us more and more. Like, what would I expect if I did something like that in Night City? Well, Maxstack would come and they would start treating me like a cyber psycho. So instead of adding this, cyber psychosis system to the game, we let players role play it and give them an actual narrative gameplay tool to do it. You can push this police system, and at this level of 4 star, you're doing it deliberately. You're not, accidentally killing more and more people. This is something that we know you're pushing the system. So we introduced this hugely narrative or cinematic piece to the game where Maxstack comes. They usually beat your ass, but they are harder unit. And for us, it was quite challenging in terms of scope because on a technical level, Maxstack unit is basically like a dynamic boss fight that can happen anywhere in the game. We do not control the level, and that was something quite new to our systems. But we pushed for it just to introduce this fantasy element to it. Another part that, or rather, the last part that kind of comes to mind when bringing narration and gameplay closer together from gameplay perspective are all the situations in which we decided to take some compromise. Maybe add some scope for ourselves or kill some of our darlings to make some room for the narration. And first situation like that, let me just quickly. So this section in the game is called the Cerberus section. And from the very beginning of it, when we started working on it, it was actually a boss fight. We spent a lot of time working to have this boss fight in the game. It was quite maybe a little bit obvious from the gameplay perspective that at that time you should have a boss fight. But when we were discussing this section in some iterative way with our narration, we just came to the conclusion that, well, for this specific moment in the story, it would really resonate with player if they couldn't deal damage to Cerberus because of the need of help by another character in the game that is hugely important for the story. And if this character helps us in a situation that we were kinda dealing with because we were damaging Cerberus anyways, it was less resonating with the player. But if we actually sell the idea that you literally cannot do anything to this machine and someone helps you, that resonates with player way more, and the connection with the character that helped you is just, you know, boosted. And that's what we did. We killed our darling, and that was an actual, you know, kick for us because we spent quite a few iterations on making this boss fight work. But we accepted it. We reworked it to be completely new section. It's not a boss fight at all. It's a section when you are being chased by Cerberus. But that worked in the long run very well with our narration and how this piece resonated with players. And there are another examples in which we decided to add more scope to create something very systemic that works for a very small portion of the game. And an example, or a couple of examples like this, there is this ambush that you basically set up an ambush for max stack unit with Reed. And this was a situation in which we had all the pieces needed to make it work. We can just place Reed, you know, somewhere on top of the building, make it shoot enemies, deal damage to them, call it a day. But again, with narration layer, we decided that it would be really awesome to make it feel like if Reed wasn't there, we wouldn't do shit. And that's what we did. We reworked, like we created this whole systemic feature that took a huge amount of scope for us to actually sell it, that you cannot deal damage to enemies unless Reed is shooting, aiming at them. And for us, this was only used for this, you know, 3 minutes piece of the game, but it was worth it for the narration to actually resonate more. Some of the other examples to quickly mention, the Chimera boss fight, we wanted to sell that Mayers, which is a very important character in the expansion, is this, you know, awesome president with a gun. She's a badass. And we worked quite a lot to actually sell it in the gameplay layer, that she is kicking ass in the combat. Or the Kurt boss fight that you see right now. This is something that with our AI systems, it was quite challenging to create a boss fight with a character that uses a knife. Because of how fast player is, our game was rather, you know, wasn't really prepared for such situations. But because this knife was a very important piece of this character in the narrative layer, we decided to, you know, add this scope to ourselves and make it work. All right, so now we are moving to a little bit more structural changes that were actually needed when we let's go again back to finishing of the base game. And the first thing that we started seeing that needs to change was how our structure is even built in the whole game. And one thing that I usually like to mention is, well, the question of how are game designers different from surgeons? I'd love to think that not that much, but what is actually different here and what matters for this context is the iteration time. When surgeon is operating on a patient, They know whether the patient died or not right after the operation, a day later maybe. When a game designer is working on their patient, they can realize that the patient is dead 2, 6, or 10 years from the initial operation, from when the initial operation happened. And we needed to do something about it because we needed this iteration time to actually allow ourselves to make some more mistakes. And this is how our structure, very simplified from a developer's perspective, looked like. We were very much waterfallish, and we had silo structure in our teams, meaning that we had one feature, and animators work with animators, programmers worked with programmers, designers worked with designers, and they somehow, through very much dependency-related communication flow, tried to make this feature work. And in March 2021, we decided to acquire a new methodology to our systems, which is the Agile Methodology, something completely new for us. Obviously, as with every company, it's Agile-ish, because I don't think any company actually has Agile, but or rather Scrum-ish. And this is what we moved to. We split features to be worked on interdisciplinary teams. So we no longer had to create a dependency as designers with animators or with programmers to create some feature. We rather worked together as a team consisted of from many different people from many different teams, and we worked on a feature daily, just syncing together and deciding what things do we need for it to work. And this transformation actually introduced some of the challenges and benefits to our methodology. First and foremost, we needed some time to adapt to it. It was, again, time of chaotic changes in our company. We just moved to home office model, we just released a big game, and that was another thing that we kind of needed to adjust to. And on top of that, such structural change diluted our responsibility, meaning that when we started having more features that are driven by more teams, we started seeing that people do not really take ownership over them. And it started being something a little bit challenging to work with, because this ownership feel to it was something that we needed to work out, and it took time as well. But it introduced a lot of benefits to us. We communicated better. We actually started iterating on our features to bigger degree. We were able to actually take risks because if we were iterating more on certain features, we could just allow ourselves to fail to a certain degree and decide on it a little bit later. We also gained way bigger design freedom in terms of our designs sometimes came from unexpected places. Some programmer had an idea or some QA, and they weren't designer per se, but the idea was good. That was all that mattered. And we started enhancing this more and more, that whenever you come from, you can have an idea and let's just talk about it, maybe let's implement it to the game. And obviously that summed up to a healthier work environment. And at some last thoughts from the whole thing, how do I personally view our approach to bringing the narration closer with gameplay and those structural changes? Well, in my opinion, the first thing that is hugely important is how much more immersive the game became from a gameplay perspective. We started seeing people noticing it, that all of these things are actually visible by players. And the new team structure, as I mentioned, introduced more design freedom, which is always cool. And some last thoughts about the silo structure. This is something that first and foremost, in my opinion, will not ever be removed by the leadership from top down. This is something that you have to kind of motivate people to work every day for removing it from from bottom up. But also silo structure is something that you probably sometimes need, because we didn't reduce silos entirely. We still had some silos in our game that still needed to be there, because silos just scale better. And if you have a AAA game project, well, you cannot involve every single person in every single topic. There has to be some limitation to it. All right, so let's sum up what we discussed today. We started by introducing the new area to the game, Docktown, which we had to make a call whether or not we are changing how this area feels for the player, or we are redesigning our things to completely for this fantasy to be able to be in the area. Then we talked about the Espionage Fantasy, the spy thriller feeling of the game, and how we introduced new arsenal, how we reworked our spy systems, or rather stealth systems in the game. Then we moved to the player build and how we started treating it as very much a player's identity. What do they feel their V is like? Then we moved to the choices in gameplay and making some room for them with the new health system, for example, the new tier system on weapons, and probably we could discuss some of the other examples here as well. And then what fits Cyberpunk world, along with putting player directly inside of Cyberpunk, how we realized that this is a very unique place to be in and how we can enhance it through gameplay to tell more narrative, or rather tell more stories through gameplay. Then we moved to compromises that we made with narration layer to make some space for narration pieces to just tell more, or rather resonate more with player, and then we ended up with some structural changes that were needed. Thank you all for listening. My name is Rafał Obrębski. Again, I was a design coordinator on the Phantom Liberty and 2.0 projects. I'm also a gameplay designer at CD PROJEKT RED. Here are some of the titles that you can find my name in, and some of the socials to reach out for me. Thank you. I suppose we have some time for questions. All right, I suppose we can end earlier. Oh, yes.
So I'm wondering, because all of this we were building on one kind of baseline that you had from the vanilla game. How do you think all the lessons that you had transfer to the next project that you're building, right? Whether it's going to be, eventually next Cyberpunk or the results.
Mm-hmm. So the question was, we were building the changes for Phantom Liberty and 2.0 on some sort of baseline, and how those can translate to new projects that we were building. And it's quite difficult question to answer because our teams change, and the memory of what happened sometimes change with people that just leave to a different company or to a different project. But all I can say is, whenever with new teams that we build for the new projects, well, we try to transfer this knowledge, and we try to kind of push for this sort of attitude towards the game. It is challenging. It's not something that comes for free, but well, I have hope. All right. So thank you all, and see you around.